Imagine that you are riding a motorcycle with your friend, and then suddenly the vehicle runs out of fuel. More precisely, it runs out of the chemical energy in the form of gasoline. The motorcycle will stop. Magtutulak kayo ngayon. By the way, if sasakay kayo ng motor, please make sure to always wear a helmet and follow the road rules and be safe, okay? Going back, nearly every activity in this modern society depends on one kind of energy or another. Thus, energy is often described as the ability to do work. The motorcycle needs chemical energy in the form of gasoline in order to move. Then, if you are having some late night talks with your friends, you need electrical energy for your phone and for your Wi-Fi to continue the conversation, especially in case the battery of your phone drains. And of course, living things are no exception, because living things depend on energy too. Whether it is obvious, such as when you need energy in order to push the motorcycle, or less obvious, such as when your cells are busy using energy to make new proteins inside your body while you sleep. Overall, without the ability to obtain and use energy, life would cease to exist. Hence, all organisms need energy to sustain life. Literal nga naman, kung wala kang enerhiya, ay wala kang buhay. Wala kang buhay, wala kang enerhiya. In this module, we will focus on the topics of photosynthesis and respiration and tackle how organisms obtain energy from food as well as how organisms produce energy. This is your biology module for grade 9, photosynthesis and respiration. I am your Kuya EJ, a PhilSci Hub intern, a BS Biology student majoring in botany, and I am your Dalub Halaman.
For the objectives, at the end of this module, we are expected to first, identify the parts and organelles involved in photosynthesis and cell respiration. Second, differentiate basic features and importance of photosynthesis and respiration. And third, analyze the factors that have an impact on the rate of photosynthesis and cell respiration. At this part, I will be reading some questions for your pretest. You can also pause the video in order for you to read and answer the questions that follow in the best way you can. Your answer will give us the necessary information on what you already know and those topics that need to be given more emphasis. The answer for your pretest will be shown on the synthesis at the last part of this module. Again, you can pause the video to answer on your own. At least try to answer all the questions within 10 minutes. Alright, if you're ready, let us begin the pretest. Question number 1. The gumamela plant can make its own food through the process of photosynthesis. In general, what do you call the organisms which can make their own food? A. Autotrophs, B. Chemotrophs, C. Heterotrophs, D. Oligotrophs. Question 2. Hinata is playing volleyball. The energy needed by cells comes from ATP, which is used by cells as their basic energy source. ATP stands for what? A. Adenine thymine phosphate, B. Adenosine triphosphate, C. Adenosine triphosphorus, D. Adenosine triphoton. Question 3. Plants gather the sun's energy with light-absorbing molecules called pigments. The plant's principal pigment is what? A. ATP, B. Carotenoid, C. Chlorophyll, D. Starch. For question 4, The Calvin cycle uses ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reactions to produce high-energy sugars. The Calvin cycle is also known as what? A. Cellular respiration. B. Electron transport chain. C. Light-dependent reaction. And D. Light-independent reaction. Alright, question 5. In the process of photosynthesis, the most important parts of the plants are the leaves. If that is the case, how does a cactus, a plant without true leaves, conduct photosynthesis? A. The cactus cannot do photosynthesis. B. The cactus carries out photosynthesis in its specialized stems. C. The cactus only absorbs water through its roots in order to survive. D. The cactus waits for its flower to bloom before it can do photosynthesis. Question 6. Living things get the energy they need from food. Both plant and animal cells carry out the final stages of cellular respiration in which of the following cell organelles? A. Chlorophyll. B. Cytoplasm. C. Lysosome. D. Mitochondria. Question 7. Kuya EJ loves to eat kimchi. Kimchi is a product of fermentation. If Kuya EJ wants to make his own kimchi, which of the following elements must be absent in the process of fermentation? A. Carbon. B. Hydrogen. C. Oxygen. D. Nitrogen. Question 8. If the pathways of cellular respiration require oxygen, they are said to be what? A. Aerobic. B. Anaerobic. C. Photosynthetic. And D. Synthetic. Question 9. The electron transport chain uses high-energy electrons from the Krebs cycle to convert what? A. ADP into ATP. B. ADP into glucose. C. ATP into ADP. And D. ATP into NADPH. And for the last question, for question 10, the blank of photosynthesis are similar to the blank of cellular respiration. A. Products, products. B. Products, reactants. C. Reactants, products. And D. Reactants, reactants. Okay, now let's proceed to the definition of terms. First, we have the autotroph. Autotroph are the organisms such as plants which can make their own food. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, are the organisms such as animals and mushrooms or fungi which obtain energy from the foods they consume or decompose. Adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, is one of the principal chemical compounds that is used by all types of cells as their basic energy source. Then photosynthesis, it is a series of reactions that uses light energy from the sun to convert water and carbon dioxide into sugars and oxygen. Then we have the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll is the plant's principal pigment, and there are two main types, which are the chlorophyll A and the chlorophyll B. We also have here the Calvin cycle, also known as the light-independent reactions. It uses ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reactions to produce high-energy sugars. And then cellular respiration, it is the process that releases energy by breaking down glucose and other food molecules in the presence of oxygen. And lastly, Krebs cycle, which is the second stage of cellular respiration. Pyruvic acid is broken down into carbon dioxide in a series of energy extracting reactions. Now let's discuss the photosynthesis. Kulay ang buhay, makulay ang buhay sa sinabawang gulay. Alright, that is a famous line from a song in a Filipino advertisement promoting the importance of eating vegetables or gulay. Indeed, metaphorically, life is colorful with vegetables. In the field of science, these vegetables or plants can actually give us energy, which is needed for life. That is why makulay talaga ang buhay with gulay. I believe that most of you do not actually like vegetables, but believe me or not, without these plants, life would cease to exist. The ability to work is provided by energy, as we discussed on the previous slide. But where does the energy required by living things come from? Of course, from the food, although originally, the energy in most food comes from the sun. But how? Is it really possible to gain energy from the sun? The answer is yes. Food can be produced by plants and some other sorts of organisms using the light energy from the sun. These organisms are known as autotrophs, which includes some protists, bacteria, and plants. This is accomplished through a process known as photosynthesis. On the other hand, other creatures, including animals, cannot directly utilize the energy of the sun since they are unable to conduct photosynthesis. To get energy, they instead eat or consume plants or other autotrophs. These consumers are referred to as the heterotrophs. For example, this leaf is undergoing photosynthesis, which turns light energy into chemical energy that insects like this grasshopper can use. So again, this leaf is undergoing photosynthesis, making its own food, and turns light energy into chemical energy. And since the grasshopper cannot make its own food, for it to have the energy to jump, it will eat the leaf to gain energy. Furthermore, this plant that you can see on the slide is an autotroph because it uses light energy from the sun to produce food through the process of photosynthesis. Meanwhile, the grasshopper gets its energy by eating the leaf of the plant, while the bird gets its energy by eating the grasshopper and the other insects. Insects and birds are both heterotrophs because they depend on autotrophs to gain energy, and that is basically, unlike the autotrophs, these organisms cannot make their own food. Now let's have an overview with photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is derived from the Greek words photo, which means light, and synthesis, which means putting together. Therefore, it means using light to put things together, specifically carbohydrates or sugar. Plants use the energy from sunlight to transform water and carbon dioxide into high-energy carbohydrates, such as sugars and starches, and oxygen, a waste product, during the process of photosynthesis. In general, the process of photosynthesis uses the sun's light energy to convert water and carbon dioxide into sugars, and oxygen. Now let's check the photosynthesis equation to understand photosynthesis better. Because photosynthesis usually produces 6 carbon sugars, the C6H12O6, as the final product. The overall equation for photosynthesis can be shown as this equation shown in the slide. We have carbon dioxide plus water with the help of the sunlight energy will produce sugars and oxygen. So again, carbon dioxide plus water will be absorbed by the plants, and with the help of sunlight energy, the absorbed materials will be converted into sugars and oxygen as products of photosynthesis.
But keep in mind that the sugar mentioned here is not the same as the table sugar sucrose we use at home, okay? We simply use the term sugar to describe the food molecule produced during photosynthesis.
But the equation is not enough. The equation, however, does not explain how plants utilize these low-energy raw materials to create high-energy sugars, despite the fact that it explains that water and carbon dioxide are necessary for photosynthesis. Still, we must first understand how plants absorb solar energy. Again, the equation is not enough. We need to know how plants absorb that specific energy. On the other hand, it will be difficult for us to proceed with this topic if we don't have any prior knowledge about the components of plants, particularly those that are essential to photosynthesis. So let's quickly recap where photosynthesis occurs in plants. Similar to what we were taught in elementary school, photosynthesis occurs mainly in the leaves of the plants. Typically, or the typical parts of the leaves include the upper and lower epidermis, the mesophyll spongy layer, the vascular bundles, and the stomata. But before we proceed, it's time for some plantastic trivia. The process of photosynthesis occurs in leaves, as we have already discussed. However, did you know that there are other parts of plants that can carry out photosynthesis, in contrast to the idea we were given in primary school that photosynthesis is limited to the leaves, and that depends on the presence of chlorophyll. For instance, in a cactus, photosynthesis takes place in its specialized or modified stem. What makes you believe it occurs here? Yes, it is true to the chlorophyll that is present in the cactus stem or body. Now, if you are going to say that photosynthesis happens in the stem of the cactus because it does not have leaves, again, it does not have leaves, well, at some point you are correct because a cactus does not have true leaves, just like the typical leaves that you can see in trees. However, a cactus does still have leaves, specialized or modified leaves, and that is their spines or the tinic, which now have other functions instead of performing photosynthesis. And indeed, that function is to defend the plant from herbivores as well as to radiate heat from the stem during the hotter day and to gather condensed water vapor during the cooler night. Fantastic, right? Okay, let's go back with the main photosynthetic part of a plant. On this slide, you will see an image from BYJS showing a label diagram of the internal structure of a leaf. So in this module, we will focus on the upper and lower epidermis, the mesophyll spongy layer, or the spongy mesophyll cells, the vascular bundles, or the xylem and the phloem, and of course, the stoma, or the stomata. The upper and the lower epidermis, or the outermost layer of leaves that can be thought of as the skin, serves to protect the leaves, and it actually has nothing to do with the process of photosynthesis. Meanwhile, the mesophyll sponge layer has the greatest number of chloroplasts containing chlorophyll. These components are significant because, in addition to water and carbon dioxide, we need to keep in mind that photosynthesis requires light and chlorophyll, which captures solar energy. The sun's energy travels to Earth in the form of light, sunlight, which your eyes perceive as white, is actually a combination of various wavelengths of light. Many of these wavelengths are visible to the human eye and comprise the visible spectrum. The varied wavelengths of the visible spectrum appear as different colors to your eyes. Actually, the colors are referred to as the Roy G. Biv, or the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, the colors of the rainbow. Again, the mesophyll sponge layers contains most of the chloroplasts, and inside these chloroplasts are green pigments known as chlorophyll. Plants collect solar energy via light-absorbing molecules known as pigments. Chlorophyll is the green pigment and is the main pigment in plants. As you can see in this figure, chlorophyll is particularly effective at absorbing light in the blue to violet and red portions of the visible spectrum. And additionally, plants have other pigments that can absorb light from different parts of the visible spectrum. For instance, we have the xanthophyll or the yellow color, the carotenoid or the orange color, and the anthocyanin or the red color. Now take note of this. The idea that only green leaves can photosynthesize restricted us in the primary science. However, aside from green, there are other colors of leaves, such as orange, yellow, and red. Now it is clear that that there are other pigments involved in the process of photosynthesis. Now we are no longer limited to just green leaves when it comes to photosynthesis. How about the vascular bundles? The vascular bundles, or the veins of the plants, composed of the xylem and the phloem, function as the transport system or vessels for food and water. Furthermore, always keep in mind that phloem carries food, whereas xylem carries water. The easiest approach to recall this is by keeping in mind that the letter X from the initial letter of the word xylem is close to the letter W in the alphabet, which helps you to recall water. Phloem's pH, on the other hand, is pronounced like the letter F, which is how you may remember that F for food. Hence, phloem is for food. Okay? Now, another part of the leaves involved in the photosynthesis are the stomata, stoma when singular. Through the stomata, carbon dioxide and oxygen enters and exits the leaf. Also, let's correct myths and misconceptions about plants with this section of Hala, mali naman, correcting myths about plants. Please take note of the misconception that plants breathe by inhaling carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen. Okay? Contrary to popular belief, plants do not actually breathe like animals do. Plants, however, can absorb and release gases involved in photosynthesis through the stomata on their leaves. Wala pong baga ang mga halaman ha. Hindi po sila humihinga. They do not breathe in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide like people and other animals do. So don't say that humihinga po ang mga halaman, but instead, always keep in mind that plants absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen through the tiny openings of their leaves known as stomata. Okay, now let's go back to the chloroplast before we proceed to the reactions of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis occurs inside the chloroplast of plants and other photosynthetic organisms. The chloroplasts, shown on this slide, contain sac-like photosynthetic membranes called thylakoids. Thylakoids are organized in stalks called granum for singular, and proteins in the thylakoid membrane organize chlorophyll and other pigments into photosystems. These photosystems are the light-collecting units of the chloroplast. Stroma, on the other hand, is the space outside the thylakoid membranes. Now let's proceed to the reactions of photosynthesis. Shown in the image from BYJUs is an illustration of the chloroplast as well as its thylakoid and stroma part, featuring the two reactions of photosynthesis, the light reaction and the dark reaction. The light reaction, or the light-dependent reactions, as the name suggests, require light. That is why plants require light to grow. Light-dependent reactions take place within the thylakoid membranes of chloroplasts. Additionally, the light reaction is a series of actions that involves the absorption of light, the release of oxygen, and the creation of energy in the form of ATP and NADPH. These products will be required to complete the photosynthetic process in the following stage, which is the dark reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle. The dark reaction uses the byproducts of the light reaction and takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast. Furthermore, the dark reaction is a light-independent process that involves the formation of sugar from carbon dioxide and water molecules. But take note, do not, however, mistakenly believe that only at night, when it is dark, do dark reactions or light-independent reactions take place. It may also take place during the day. Again, it is simply referred to as dark reaction or the light-independent phase, since this part of the photosynthetic process employs the byproducts of the light reaction or the light-dependent reactions rather than direct energy from the sun. Overall, two sets of photosynthetic reactions collaborate. The light-dependent reactions store the energy of sunlight in chemical form, and the light-independent reactions utilize that chemical energy to make stable, high-energy sugars from carbon dioxide and water. And as a result, the atmosphere becomes oxygen-rich, benefiting us animals. Meanwhile, the rate of photosynthesis is influenced by a wide range of factors. Because water is one of the raw materials used in photosynthesis, a lack of it can cause photosynthesis to slow or even stop. Desert plants and conifers, which thrive in arid or dry environments, have waxy coatings on their leaves that prevent water loss. Another consideration is temperature. Enzymes necessary for photosynthesis perform best between 0 and 35 degrees Celsius. Temperatures that are either above or below this range may harm the enzymes and slow down photosynthesis. Photosynthesis could stop totally at very low temperatures. Now, how about the changing of the colors of leaves in temperate countries during autumn or fall? Again, temperature is a factor in photosynthesis. Cold winters are considered a threat to the leaves of some trees. Hence, when summer ends and fall enters, and the days start getting shorter and there is less sunlight, it is time for the plants to signal their leaves to prepare for winter and to stop making the green pigment chlorophyll. Consequently, the other colors of leaves with different pigments, which can also be used in the photosynthetic process, such as the reds from anthocyanin, the oranges from the carotenoid, and yellows from xanthophylls, become visible. Okay, going back to the factors affecting photosynthesis, the rate at which photosynthesis takes place is also influenced by light intensity. As one might anticipate, photosynthesis progresses more quickly as light intensity rises, but the plant's photosynthesis only reaches its maximal rate after the light intensity reaches a particular point. The level at which light intensity no longer affects photosynthesis varies from plant type to plant type. Conifers, for instance, or the pine trees, can only perform photosynthesis on warm, bright days. And now we are done with discussion of the basics of photosynthesis. Now let's talk about cellular respiration. Food is necessary for our bodies. Our bodies have a need for food. This explains why we sometimes feel a little dizzy and, most importantly, weak when we are hungry and our stomachs may seem empty. All heterotrophic creatures rely on plants, other photosynthetic species, and other animals for food. The chemical building blocks required for growth and reproduction are provided by food. Food is a source of raw materials from which the body's cells can synthesize new molecules. Most importantly, food provides energy. For instance, on the picture shown on this slide, the woman needs to eat after doing some exercises to gain energy, as well as to help the body achieve growth and development. But how do we really get our energy from the food we eat? The answer is cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is the process by which food molecules are broken down in the presence of oxygen to release energy. Glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain are the three stages that make up this process. And please remember that both plants and animals carry out the final stages of cellular respiration in the mitochondria, mitochondrion when singular. Furthermore, we can understand cellular respiration through this equation. So we have oxygen plus glucose, and then with the help of energy, carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. So as you can see, again, cellular respiration produces carbon dioxide, water, and energy while requiring oxygen and a food molecule like glucose. Now let's have an overview with the cellular respiration with the help of this image from thoughtco.com. Okay, at this point, we will look at the three sets of reactions in cellular respiration: the glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. In our previous slides, we have mentioned that the final two stages of cellular respiration occurs inside mitochondria. But how about the first stage, which is glycolysis? The first stage in cellular respiration, again, is glycolysis, and this occurs in the cytoplasm or the liquid portion of the cell. Glycolysis is derived from the Greek word glucous, which means sweet, and the Latin word lysis, which represents a loosening or decomposing process. Glycolysis is thus defined as breaking glucose. Furthermore, one glucose molecule is split in two during the process of glycolysis, yielding two molecules of pyruvic acid. An energy yield of just a few molecules of ATP and NADPH is obtained in this process. Meanwhile, when oxygen is not present after the process of glycolysis, it is followed by a different pathway known as fermentation. Fermentation releases energy in the form of food molecules by producing ATP in the absence of oxygen. And because fermentation does not require oxygen, it is classified as anaerobic. At this point, we will discuss the remaining two stages of cellular respiration, the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. But before we proceed, keep in mind that oxygen is necessary for the last stages of cellular respiration. Okay? And the question, if a process uses oxygen, what do you think it is called? You got it right. It's called aerobic. Okay. In the presence of oxygen, pyruvic acid generated by glycolysis enters the Krebs cycle, the second stage of cellular respiration. Furthermore, pyruvic acid is broken down into carbon dioxide throughout the Krebs cycle by a series of energy extracting processes. Consequently, as the cycle continues, carbon dioxide is released, then chemical energy is generated. In general, the Krebs cycle is a series of events that supplies energy during aerobic respiration. And lastly, the electron transport chain is the third step of cellular respiration, or the third stage, which turns ADP, or the adenosine diphosphate, into ATP, or the adenosine triphosphate. In this stage of cellular respiration, the highest amount of chemical energy in the form of ATP is produced. Now, regarding the factors that affect cellular respiration, we may take into account the following: temperature, light, oxygen and water supply, carbon dioxide concentration, harmful and stimulating chemicals, diseases, and injuries. Now that we are done with the discussion of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, their basics, let us try to compare the two processes. The energy flows in photosynthesis and cellular respiration takes place in opposite directions. To better understand, imagine that the chemical energy in carbohydrates is money in a savings account. The process that deposits energy is photosynthesis, and the process that withdraws energy is cellular respiration. And to further understand the differences between the two, let us check this table. When it comes to function, photosynthesis captures energy in the form of sunlight energy, while the cellular respiration releases energy in the form of ATP. For the location, photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplasts, while cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria. Talking about the reactants, or the starting materials of photosynthesis, it will begin with the presence of carbon dioxide and water, which is, on the other hand, the end product of cellular respiration. In the case of cellular respiration, its starting materials are sugar and oxygen, which is, on the contrary, the end products of photosynthesis. As you may guess and observe, the equations for photosynthesis and cellular respiration, or the starting materials and the products on each process, are the reverse of each other. Okay? Just a soft reminder, always keep in mind that in order for our world to preserve its equilibrium or balance, we must take care of it. We can all work to protect the planet from the dangers of climate change and global warming in our own small ways. Let's recognize the value of plants in the world because they provide us with oxygen and they absorb carbon dioxide, which is one of the major contributors to global warming. Okay, now it's time for a short quiz. Again, just like in our pretest, you can pause the video to answer on your own. And again, at least try to answer all the questions within 10 minutes. The answer will be given at the last part of this quiz. Okay, let's begin. Question number one. The leaves of a plant appear green because chlorophyll blank. A. Absorbs blue light. B. Absorbs green light. C. Reflects blue light. And D. Reflects green light. Okay. Question number two. Which of the following is an autotroph? A. A human. B. Mushroom. C. Plant. And D. Tiger. Alright, question number three. In addition to water and oxygen, photosynthesis requires blank. A. ATP and NADPH. B. Carbon dioxide and sugar. C. Hydrogen and oxygen. And D. Light and chlorophyll. Right, question number four. Which of the following cell organelle contains chlorophyll? A. Cell membrane. B. Chloroplast. C. Golgi bodies. And D. Mitochondria. For question number five, which of the following are factors affecting photosynthesis? 1. Light intensity. 2. Temperature. 3. Water supply. The choices are A. 1 only. B. 1 and 2. C. 2 and 3. And D. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, question 6. The Krebs cycle takes place within the blank. A. Chloroplast. B. Cytoplasm. C. Mitochondria. And D. Nucleus. Question 7. Which of the following is the first stage of cellular respiration? A. Electron transport chain. B. Calvin cycle. C. Glycolysis. D. Krebs cycle. Alright, question 8. Which organisms perform cellular respiration? Here are the images. For 1, we have an image of mushrooms. For 2, we have a sunflower. For 3, we have a butterfly. And for 4, we have a grass. A. Only the mushroom. B. Only the mushroom and the butterfly. C. Only 2 and 4, or the sunflower and the grass. And D. All of the above. Question 9. In this stage of cellular respiration, the highest amount of chemical energy in the form of ATP is produced. A. Electron transport chain. B. Calvin cycle. C. Glycolysis. And D. Krebs cycle. And last question, question number 10. Photosynthesis removes blank from the atmosphere and cellular respiration puts it back. A. Carbon dioxide. B. Hydrogen. C. Nitrogen. And D. Oxygen. Okay, so let's expect that you have finished answering all the questions. And if you're still not done answering all the questions, you can pause the video before we give you the answers. Okay, so the answers for the quiz for question one: the leaves of a plant appear green because chlorophyll reflects green light. The answer is letter D. Question two: which of the following is an autotroph? If your answer is C, then you are correct. It is only the plant among the choices is the only autotroph. Question three: in addition to water and oxygen, photosynthesis requires D, light and chlorophyll. Next question. Question four, the answer is chloroplast. So which of the following cell organelle contains chlorophyll? That is the chloroplast. Question five. For question five, which of the following are factors affecting photosynthesis? The answer is letter D, 1, 2, and 3. So all of these are factors affecting photosynthesis: the light intensity, temperature, and the water supply. The answer for question 6, the Krebs cycle takes place within the blank, and it's in the mitochondria, letter C. Question 7, which of the following is the first stage of cellular respiration? The answer is letter C, or glycolysis. Question 8, which organisms perform cellular respiration? The answer is D, all of the above. Lahat po ng mga organisms na nakikita ninyong yan ay kayang undergone ng cellular respiration. Question 9. In this stage of cellular respiration, the highest amount of chemical energy in the form of ATP is produced, and the answer is electron transport chain. And lastly, for question 10, photosynthesis removes blank from the atmosphere and cellular respiration puts it back. The answer is carbon dioxide. So photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then cellular respiration puts carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere. Okay, now let's have the answer to our pretest. So we have the syntheses. So again, for question 1, the gumamela plant can make its own food through the process of photosynthesis. In general, what do you call the organisms which can make their own food? And the answer is A, autotrophs. For the next question, Hinata is playing volleyball. The energy needed by cells comes from ATP, which is used by cells as their basic energy source. ATP stands for what? And the answer is B, adenosine triphosphate. For question number 3, plants gather the sun's energy with light-absorbing molecules called pigments. The plant's principal pigment is what? If your answer is C, then you're correct. The answer is chlorophyll. For the next question, the Calvin cycle uses ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reactions to produce high-energy sugars. The Calvin cycle is also known as what? And the answer is D, light-independent reaction. Question 5. In the process of photosynthesis, the most important parts of the plants are the leaves. If that is the case, How does a cactus, a plant without true leaves, conduct photosynthesis? If your answer is B, then you're definitely correct because the cactus carries out photosynthesis in its specialized stems. For the sixth question, living things get the energy they need from food. Both plant and animal cells carry out the final stages of cellular respiration in which of the following cell organelles? And the answer is letter D, mitochondria. Now for question 7, Kuya EJ loves to eat kimchi. Kimchi is a product of fermentation. If Kuya EJ wants to make its own kimchi, which of the following elements must be absent in the process of fermentation? The answer here is letter C, and that is oxygen. Remember that fermentation is anaerobic, thus it means doesn't need oxygen in its process. All right, for question 8, if the pathways of cellular respiration require oxygen, they are said to be what? And the answer here is letter A, aerobic. Question 9, the electron transport chain uses high-energy electrons from the Krebs cycle to convert what? And the answer is ADP, or the adenosine diphosphate, into ATP, or the adenosine triphosphate. So it's letter A. And for the last question, the answer is B, products, reactants. So the products of photosynthesis are similar to the reactants of cellular respiration. All right, so these are the topics discussed for the whole module. Again, the basic features and importance of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, then the parts and organelles engaged in photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and lastly, the factors affecting photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, let's have a short review. Always remember that photosynthesis uses the energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high-energy sugars and oxygen. It also has two processes, which includes the light reactions or the light-dependent reactions, and the dark reactions, also known as the light-independent reactions or Calvin cycle. It is also important to note that water supply, temperature, and intensity of light are some factors affecting photosynthesis. On the other hand, the cellular respiration is the process that releases energy by breaking down glucose and other food molecules in the presence of oxygen. It has three major stages, which includes glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. Temperature, light, oxygen and water supply, carbon dioxide concentration, harmful and stimulating chemicals, diseases, and injuries are some factors affecting cellular respiration. Okay, for our assessments, we have the following, which you can access on our website. We have comparing photosynthesis and cellular respiration. We have fall for autumn, phlomo, and plants interior. All right. Thank you for listening, mga ka-PhilSci-Hub. If you guys have questions, please don't hesitate to message us on our social media accounts. Once again, I am your Kuya EJ, ang inyong dalub halaman. Hanggang sa muli.